close your eyes and think to yourself, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place.
Dorothy, child, oh, wake up, please wake up.
No place like home. No place like home. We're home, and this is my room, and you're all here, and I'm never going to leave here ever again, because I love you all. Oh, Annie M., there's no place like home.
My ideas about Kansas before I came here were not very many ideas. I didn't know a whole lot about Kansas, and most of what I'd heard was not very good. I literally Googled, are there gay people in Kansas before I moved here, and everything I got was results about horrible homophobic legislation, so it was really not promising.
I am a native Kansan. I'm from Western Kansas. I'm from a really small town of about 5,000 people. It's called Goodland. It's on the Colorado border. We're so far west, we're in Mountain Time.
I'm from Dodge City, Kansas. Born and raised, first generation Mexican American. I'm gay.
I'm from Southwest Kansas in a little town called Buckland. We're 30 miles southeast of Dodge City and 20 miles west of Greensburg. It's a small 800-person town, no stoplights, pretty typical for Western Kansas.
I was born right here in Manhattan, lived here up until I was about 25, and then I left.
Well, growing up in Olathe, I would have teachers who would openly talk about their dislike of LGBTQ people, how they were opposed to marriage equality. And now I see a lot of stuff, within Johnson County where I grew up, where people are like, oh, trans kids shouldn't play sports.
And where I am is in the middle of Western Kansas, in the reddest part of the state. It's easier to be gay than it is to be Democrat.
Real talk, we're in Kansas. And I don't mean that in a horrible way, because I was born and raised here, but we're in Kansas. It's Kansas. Nothing personal, but they're very conservative here.
Growing up in Leavenworth, I quickly learned The Wizard of Oz was the first association many Americans had with my home state of Kansas. To this day, I think we're not in Kansas anymore remains a punchline, one with particular relevance to the LGBTQ community. Dorothy's journey reflects the actual experience of many Kansans who grew up coming to terms with their sexuality. Dorothy runs away from her black and white farm and its traditional values and finds her way to the Technicolor big city, where she meets three weird companions, initially considered defective, but ultimately these characters become heroic examples of self-acceptance. As the film grew to legendary status in American pop culture, "Are you a friend of Dorothy?" became a coded question for gay men to identify one another. But embracing this story requires denying the ending of the film. Dorothy is welcomed back by her loving family, but for countless members of the LGBTQ community, home is filled with unpleasant memories and painful emotions. One example is Gilbert Baker of Parsons. It took leaving his home and becoming a part of a community in San Francisco for him to finally live openly as a gay man. That's where visionary gay rights leader Harvey Milk asked Baker to create an emblem for the movement. Baker's rainbow flag connected with the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow and would become the international symbol of diversity and liberation. While Gilbert Baker was making positive strides on the West Coast in Topeka, Kansas, Fred Phelps and his Westboro Baptist Church were becoming the symbol of hate and intolerance in the nation. Many Republican legislatures sell the same hate against LGBTQ Kansans.
Yes, it's sad, believe me, missy, when you're born to be a sissy without the vim and verve. But I could show my prowess, be a lion, not a mouse, if I only had the nerve.
And a brain, a heart,
A home.
The nerve.
They make it more difficult for those who choose to remain in Kansas.
This is the story of a girl named Dorothy.
I lived here with my mom and dad, and my dad was a farmer, and he was mostly here on the farmstead, feeding cattle, working on machinery, something. So I was always with my dad. I was always 3 steps behind my dad, and they used to call me Little August because wherever you found my dad, that's where I was. And I can remember my mom forcing me to wear a dress to town on Saturday nights and thinking I'm going to be utterly humiliated in this dress. Ooh, patent leather shoes. I had to do the whole thing, and I just fought it in a way that was sort of not normal. And my mom and dad knew there was something wrong with me. My family knew there was something wrong with me, but I didn't have words for it. In fact, it wasn't until I got to college that I really understood what I was.
I love Dodge City. I mean, it's, like I said, I was born and raised in Dodge City. It's a small, I mean, not necessarily, for Western Kansas, it's a big town. So I'm going to say it's a big town. 30,000 people. Meat packing plants dominate the workforce there, and that's where both my parents work. They have worked there since they got here. And so I sat down my family at the dinner table and, like, almost crying, I called everybody to the kitchen, and I was like, I'm bi. And then my brother and sister were like, okay. And they didn't really care. And they went off to do their own thing again. But my mom and dad were, they're like, initially they were like skeptical. They're like, this is a phase, all this stuff. And they were right about it being a phase, kind of, but like in the opposite direction. I'm gay, I'm not straight. So not necessarily, bisexuality is a phase, but yeah, I was still coming to understand myself.
Mom actually came out to me, or for me. I was working construction then, and I had been home for the weekend, and it's Sunday evening, and I got to be thinking about driving back to Caney, Kansas, down on the Oklahoma border. And we were downtown, sitting in the pickup. I would go into Town Crier every month and pick up Numbers magazine. We're in the truck, and Mom, before we get out, she says that she knows something's been bugging me all weekend, and she wishes I'd tell her what was going on. And I told her I needed to talk to her, but I hadn't figured out quite how to bring it up and do it. She looks over at me and she just says, "What, did you have a boyfriend?" And so, okay, we don't have to have that discussion.
I had been in a relationship with a wonderful man who was a really good friend of mine for about 6 years, and just started to realize, with someone who met all of my needs, like why I was still really unhappy. Wasn't sure what that was.
I mean, I was going to get married. I had my whole life planned out for me. There was no turning back. And I could not have brought that kind of shame to my mom and dad. I just couldn't do it. So that was when I was 18. And it took until I was 32 to actually get divorced, come out, become a real practicing lesbian. I spent a lot of time practicing.
I knew I was gay probably even in junior high. Growing up in a place like this, I didn't altogether know what that was. I had no exposure to another gay person on TV or anything else for that matter. But I knew I liked boys, not the way I was supposed to like girls. I tried really hard not to be. I did know fairly early after that, because of Anita Bryant, that it wasn't a good thing. And I had relationships with girls all through high school and even into college, but I knew that wasn't who I really was. Anita Bryant was a singer. She was the spokesperson for the Florida orange juice industry.
What's a Florida girl doing here in the heart of the Midwest? Reminding you that 100% orange juice from Florida puts a little bit of sunshine into every day, even where the sun doesn't always shine. Orange.
She found religion in a big way. I think she had always been a religious person, but she took it upon herself to be the spokesperson for Christians against homosexuality. And she was very, very vocal about it. And because she was a celebrity, she was in the news. Yesterday was the 40th anniversary of a gay man putting a cream pie in her face on live TV.
If we were going to go on a crusade across the nation and try to do away with the homosexuals, then we certainly would have done it on June the 8th. And every...
You're the agent. You're the agent. No, let him stay.
No.
Let him stay.
Well, at least it's a fruit pie.
I laughed then, and I still laugh. But yeah, she made it. She made those of us who didn't know much about being gay, and that there were so many of us, feel that it was wrong. We were watching the news one night, and she was on there and spouting her hate, and and I'm sitting back thinking that she's talking about me, and how's my family going to react to this? My mother, I knew at that time Mom would be cool, because her reaction was, I don't see where that bitch gets off telling other people how to live their lives.
You have two forces here, you have that should be going against me, that should be fighting against me coming out and me being who I am. You've got this like rural Western American like ruggedness, expectations of what a man should be, and that is one thing is you're not supposed to be gay, you're not supposed to be attracted to other men. And then we've got this machista culture and from like Mexican folks who were like, yeah, a man should not be attracted to other men, a man should not be feminine, a man should not be XYZ.
Growing up in Kansas was challenging at times. It was an interesting experience in that, I had great family support. I had a lot of, love in my family. But I struggled a lot in school. I was pretty socially inept. I wasn't able to read social cues. It was just a really difficult experience all around in terms of that. But on top of that, other people figured out I was queer before I did. I didn't really have that kind of sense of understanding about myself as early as other people, I guess, could read that I was queer. And it was tough because, I was also trans and I didn't know it either. So it was just a really difficult experience all around, feeling uncomfortable in my body, feeling uncomfortable with other people, thinking people were my friends and they were making fun of me, spreading fairly malicious rumors about sexuality and things like that. And it was a tough time growing up. But, I was also really lucky to have a great support system in my family.
One of my friends and I were on a play date with our kids, and the kids were playing off in the dirt, and this friend came out to me as trans, and I will cry at this part. We were both about 34 at the time, and I just got so angry for him. I left, and I drove home. The whole time I was like, try not to cry, because I can't imagine being 34 and I was the first person he'd come out to. Like, he was not living his truth yet at that point.
It's emotionally exhausting to try to keep up this front of who people think you are. And I am not a person who lies easily or readily, and I felt like my entire life was a lie. I am a person of faith, and I can remember praying about this at 5 years old and continuing on and on and on. I know how dark a night can be.
Being in Lubbock, Texas for undergrad, I really couldn't explore my identities, not even my blackness, right? And so my queerness and transness was off the table. But I did meet someone that was important to me, one of my supervisors, Melinda Rendon, and brown lesbian woman in Lubbock, Texas, can't be extremely out. And so the interesting ways that queer and trans people communicate without saying words, or we're not being explicit, but we know what's going on. It's a beautiful thing, right? And so a lot of it I end up following because queerness and transness led me here to get my master's degree at the University of Kansas. It was very apparent that we could be more open with our queerness and transness in Lawrence, Kansas, right? I was told very quickly, that changes once you leave this town, right? That the experiences might look and feel differently.
Now, KU is still very much a primarily white institution. It may be the most liberal in the most liberal community in Kansas, but that doesn't make it not white. That doesn't make it the bastion of diversity.
Blackness doesn't always have a home in queerness in a predominantly white place and space, right? And so that was some hard learning. And that really got me going in making sense of who I am and the identities I hold and how they mix and turn.
I'm that triple threat. And my mother taught me that when I was, as long as I can remember, as long as I could comprehend, my mother told me, you'll have 3 strikes against you for the rest of your life. You're African American, and I was assigned female at birth. And I'm physically challenged. I have a mild form of cerebral palsy on my right side. So I've been battling that all my life. I have to be better. And sometimes in certain cases, I felt like I had to speak louder.
I arrived in Wichita in 2004, and I lived off of 29th Street. And there's this big, huge, fairly conservative church there. And the Phelps crew decided to protest this church basically because they just didn't hate gays quite enough. And so they were there with all their crazy signs. And then I see some protesters standing, counter protesters also standing there. And I had never seen anything so insane in my entire life. It quite literally just shocked me. And so I turned my little car around, did a U-E in the middle of the street, and walked up to the counter protesters and said, "Can I carry a sign?"
I wasn't really paying very careful attention to politics in the mid-2000s. But one night on the 6 o'clock news, there's these 2 crazy people on my TV talking about how those homosexuals shouldn't be having children. And I'm sitting there with my partner and our daughter, and it's like, oh no, now you're coming into my home. And that's what got me off my ass and involved.
I didn't get fired for being gay. I got fired for talking about being gay. If I had been quiet and never mentioned it and never gone to Topeka, nobody would have ever raised an eyebrow. As long as I was quietly gay and didn't talk about it, it was fine. But when I hit the front page of every newspaper in Kansas, oh yeah, that was a problem.
Sandra Stensel was forced from her job as Economic Development Director in Trego County because she testified as a lesbian against a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage in Kansas.
When this marriage amendment happened, and I moved here in 2004, and it was voted on in 2005, everything changed.
On April 5th, 2005, Kansas voters approved an amendment banning same-sex marriage by 70%.
It felt like the ground had shifted. I'm sitting in a room with people that I had just met, really, that year, the people that became my family here, and the emotions, because most of them were LGBTQ people, and watching them and watching that hope die and realizing what was going to happen, because that was the beginning of a very, very long struggle that continues even today.
Equality Kansas is a statewide LGBT advocacy organization. We're founded in October of 2005. That was a few months after the marriage ban passed at the state level. And one of the reasons we formed was because of the fallout in the Kansas LGBT community after that passed.
Watching someone's rights get taken away, there's no way to describe those kinds of feelings. And to know that 70% of Kansans voted to do that, as I like to say, hate is not a Kansas value. And that's what I saw that day in Kansas.
Hate seemed to be a Kansas value when in 2015, Governor Sam Brownback, through an executive order, removed legal protections for LGBTQ employees. This allowed state employees to be fired, harassed, or denied a job based on sexual orientation and gender identity. As Jon Stewart of The Daily Show put it, in Kansas, there's no place like homophobia. Brownback's homophobia was rewarded when President Donald Trump appointed him ambassador of religious freedom.
Is there any circumstance under which criminalizing, imprisoning, or executing somebody based on their LGBT status could be deemed acceptable because somebody asserts that they are religiously motivated in doing so?
I don't know what that would be, in what circumstance, but I would continue the policies that have been done in the prior administration in working on these international issues.
I really would expect an unequivocal answer on that, but my time is up.
Kansans have evolved significantly since that point of view or that time. But I still think in our leadership in the state, that sort of backward thinking continued to prevail. We saw it in all sorts of really regressive policies that were put forth and passed.
We did 4 years of religious freedom bills, supposedly religious freedom bills, but what they really were religious objection bills, where Kansans could say, my religion says I'm supposed to hate queers, so I'm going to claim my religion as a reason to engage in discrimination. There was a bill in 2011. There was a bill in 2012. Both of those bills would have undermined the ability of local cities to enact and enforce inclusive non-discrimination ordinances. And we beat both of those. They've introduced bills that literally said that same-sex marriages weren't real, that they were parody, not parity with a T, but parody like a joke, that they were sham marriages. Of course, those never got hearings.
Progress has been made. Between 2014 and 2021, more than 20 cities have passed ordinances prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, protecting nearly 50% of the state's population.
Then there's the anti-trans stuff.
When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet I'm torn apart. Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart.
And as you can imagine, I follow Stephanie Byers very closely, Kansas' first openly transgender legislator.
When I think about what it is that gets me up out of bed, sometimes at 5 o'clock in the morning, to get ready, to go in, I'm not there just for me or just for the people of House District 86, but I am there for this greater community of people who have survived. That level of survival has come through from several different elements. You know, whether we go back into the 1800s and my family being forced marched, you know, from their homes into Oklahoma. And the story of the Chickasaw Nation is a totally different one, but the fact that my ancestors somehow not only survived, but thrived through it.
When I realized that being a male impersonator was past performing, it was something else entirely. And back then I did not know the terminology. I just knew this was more than just me being lesbian stud and a drag king. It was more. There was just something that felt natural for me in performing and being in male face. Someone said, hey, you need to talk to this lady. Her name is Stephanie Mott. She writes for Liberty Press. I spoke with her and she said, you know, you might be transgender. And I was like, okay. And she taught me about the process. She taught me about the standard rules of care. And I started to I've got 4 binders about this thick of all of the things that have taken place in my journey. And Stephanie is the reason why I have that.
Stephanie Mott founded K-STEP, the Kansas statewide transgender education project, an advocacy and education organization. Mott fought to make the trans community visible in the state.
I used to always say to her, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, because literally, I'm the only person of color here. I'm the only trans man here. So it felt a little awkward. And she did her best to make me feel comfortable and that I belonged there.
In 2019, the LGBTQ community was stunned when Stephanie Mott died suddenly from a heart attack. She once said, "I did not set out to become an activist. I simply knew I could not be silent in the face of oppression and marginalization."
Some of the things that was being said about gay kids back in the 70s is that we were a danger in bathrooms. And we're hearing the exact same bathroom rhetoric targeted at trans kids now.
And so while using women's restrooms, I've gotten looks, I've gotten comments. People think I'm in the wrong place, but that's where the city requires that I be. So I don't know what else I'm supposed to do.
Thomas Vitkus, a Friends University student, appeared before the Wichita City Council and asked that they change the ordinance specifying gender rather than sex to determine what bathroom individuals can legally use.
I am very afraid that at some point someone will confront me. I'm afraid that maybe someone's boyfriend or husband will be outside that door waiting for me. I am aware of lesbian people or people who have just cut their hair who are females, who identify as female, who use their female restroom, and they've gotten beaten up.
One of the things I think that pushed me back was the reaction to a lot of discriminatory bills for trans people just trying to go to the bathroom. And I would see people on my Facebook feed, you know, saying like, "Oh, we don't want these perverts in the bathroom." And it's like, what are you talking about? I'm just trying to pee. What do you want from me? And so stuff like that pushes you back further into the closet because you see people who you have a rapport with, who you thought were nice, and you see them post like hateful stuff on their Facebook feed or their Twitter feed. And you're like, wow, like, okay, so I'm not comfortable being myself. This sets me back.
When I was a sophomore in high school, I got jumped and beaten and stabbed in a bathroom. I got outed that year at high school. And now we see trans kids getting beat up in bathrooms. But it's not so much the gay kids anymore. It's really targeted at trans kids. But it's not kids that are driving this. It's the adults.
One adult that made national headlines was State Representative Cheryl Helmer of Mulvane.
Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart.
I know that jokes are being told about me behind my back, at my expense, that there are people in that building that actively do not want me there.
He preferred to be a he, so everyone would have to call him he, and he preferred Bucky, and I don't want to share his birth name. And he was born a girl, but he wanted to be a boy. He just always thought of himself as a guy, so we respected that, and we called him a guy. He was amazing. I mean, seminar, we always goof off, and we have inside jokes, and we have all these like kind of things, and it was just fun. I mean, you couldn't really have a moment where you didn't just want to hang out with him.
It makes me feel really happy because, like, I'm inside all day, so doing something else is very nice.
He really didn't struggle with himself. It was more about the people around him that struggled for him to be himself. He didn't have struggles with him being him. It was more like people had struggles with him being himself, and people couldn't understand that. And so I think that's what played a part, was the bullying and other things that was going on. The whole day he was acting off. He wasn't acting happy. He was not acting like himself. He would say things that scared me, and he told me things that I wish that I did something about it. I heard sirens and I saw an ambulance, I heard a fire truck, I heard police, I saw all of them in our parking lot. So I texted my significant other at the time if they were okay, and I did. And then immediately I texted Bucky, and I would not get a response. And deep down, I kind of knew it was him, but I couldn't accept it. He told me he was going to say, if you don't see me on Monday, I killed myself over the weekend.
I got a text from one of our students, one of our Shine student leadership team leaders, and the text said, a student at our school just died by suicide at school. And he was a trans kid.
And I guess it just wasn't enough for him to handle, and he did it in the school bathroom.
I think it was a real wake-up call for a lot of parents who love their children. They want them to enjoy life. They want them to live and thrive and be amazing humans. But parents are scared too. When we talk about this climate of fear, and even just having these conversations, parents are so afraid for their children. And sometimes that fear comes out in not allowing their children to be themselves fully until the parents really know what's at stake.
In 2002, I gave birth to a beautiful, young, beautiful baby girl. How perfect the entrance to the world was. It was wonderful. Now I know the right words to use, and how I explain that now is I say my child was incorrectly gendered at birth as a female. We have went through the process of the legal name change, and we're going through the other process of changing the birth certificate to reflect the correct gender. A lot of people say that when their child lets them know they're transgender, that they have a time of mourning. I never mourned. When you give birth to a little girl, you have all these things that you think you're going to do with that little girl. I never mourned that those plans changed. We just changed plans. I thought I'd be arguing about makeup and dates and high heels and pantyhose, and I'm arguing about different things. I don't long for what changed, and a lot of parents do. I didn't mourn. Honestly, because we were busy fighting for other things. We were we were working towards positive affirmation in school, in the community. And so I didn't focus on high heels and pantyhose and lipstick. We were focusing on using a bathroom that was safe, using preferred pronouns, and not using we call it a dead name, not using the dead name in the time it took to get the legal name changed. And it was about kindergarten that we started noticing something was different. Different in that I don't want to wear a dress. I don't want to wear these white leotards, taking them off and putting on cowboy boots, which honestly, that's what I grew up in, jeans and cowboy boots, and that's all Lenny wanted to wear. I think when he found his words was probably between first and third grade. I don't like this. This isn't me. The timing worked well to move out here to the farm because we could do farm things, and that was nature and farm and horses and ducks and goats. So it was after a volleyball game, a junior high volleyball game, and we were in this house, and I was cooking, and he was at the dining room table, and over a book, I don't know what subject it was, he put his pencil down and he just started crying. And I said, what's going on? And he's just like, I could tell he was just like, I'm just going to throw it out there. He's like, Mom, I'm a boy. And it was like all of a sudden, everything connected. This all of the sudden made sense because we had talked about, are you a lesbian? Are you bisexual? Are you pansexual? I don't know, Mom. I don't know. I don't know what I am. What am I? And then it started to make sense. I will tell you that Lenny's gender continues to evolve. He would tell you now that he is a feminine presenting man. And I'm like, that's great. You wear whatever clothes you want, because the first thing I did when he told him that was, we're going to go get boxers and we're going to get button down the front shirts and bow ties, and because that's how I thought best to help him, when really I just needed to let him develop himself. He taught me a lot in this journey. I needed to like a flower, I needed to let his colors come out and his foliage come out in whatever way, shape, or form he wanted. We were pre-warned that kids were going to be in the crosshairs, and the first thing I remember, it came out from my support group in Lawrence that here comes the first bill.
There were, best we could tell, 5 students out of 100,000 student athletes who had identified as transgender students who wanted to play athletics. So 5 out of 100,000. One of them, I believe, was a transgender girl. So we're spending hours and hours of time, both in committee and on the Senate floor, talking about this issue that deals with, at most, maybe 5 students across the state, when the Kansas State High School Activities Association already has a policy on this issue that, as best we could tell, as best was presented to all of us, seemed to be working quite well.
There is an element of bullying there. And, you know, having taught school for so long, anytime you caught some kid as a bully doing something, they always had an excuse. There was always a reason why it wasn't bullying. You know, it's like, oh, I was just joking. Or it's, well, they're doing this, so I didn't have a choice. I had to do this. And what we see right now, we see this legislation from people in power pushing to bullying trans girls in particular, not trans women, trans girls, and then saying, well, no, we're not bullying them. This is about protecting a fairness of leveling the playing field of, and they seem to be completely unaware that this is the same dialogue that was used before schools were integrated.
They are politicizing trans identity to the point where they want to legislate it out of existence.
Well, what would you do with a brain if you had one?
Do? Why, if I had a brain, I could.
I was the first person to graduate from college because of an athletic scholarship. But basketball gave me so much more, as it does all athletes. It taught me teamwork, self-discipline, gave me leadership opportunities. Senate Bill 208's sole purpose is to protect the opportunities that I had by ensuring that only biological females compete in girls' sports, because every female athlete deserves a fair playing field.
Sports was one of the few things that really made me feel better growing up. I wasn't out as trans, but, you know, I can't imagine not having that outlet that helped me really grow as a kid, and was one of the few things I could do that was really fun.
Being raised in a family with other girl sisters, as well as a boy, it was always pretty competitive between my sisters and I, but we were never able to compete with my brother. We all swam at what people would consider the highest level in our country, if not the world. And it still wasn't even close with my brother.
You know, you've got a lot of people who don't understand what being transgender even is.
I worked incredibly hard to develop my basketball skills. When I competed against other girls in middle school and high school, I dominated. But no matter how sophisticated my skills became, I could never overcome the superior size, strength, and speed of the male athletes at the YMCA.
You've got these attacks on trans children because you've got a lot of misinformation being spread by people who, you know, don't want us to have the same access to healthcare or recreational activities, people who want to make it illegal to be trans and legislate it out of existence.
My daughter, for 2 years, battled anxiety and depression. I would sit with her, not knowing why she was so sad, why she was battling suicidal ideation, and not understanding why I couldn't help her. When she finally told me, "Mom, I'm a girl," everything made sense. We finally were able to work through it in therapy, which she had been in for years. And the smile that I hadn't seen in years has come back. This bill is telling children like my daughter that she is less than other children. You're telling children like my daughter that she doesn't belong in activities. And you are telling children like my daughter that it's okay for them to not be with the other children. I sat with my daughter many nights while she cried and said I should just kill myself because maybe then I'll wake up and be a girl. I ask you to please vote no on this bill.
You're targeting literal children in your efforts to politicize an issue that shouldn't be political at all. It's a bathroom. It's sports. It's, they identify as a boy or a girl, and they want to play sports with people who look like them and who they relate to. That's it. It's not a political issue.
I've been a school principal for over a decade, and I'm a lifelong Kansan. I'm from Conway Springs, Kansas, which can't get any more small rural Kansas than that. I'm an educator of over 2 decades, during which time I got to work with both Representative Erickson and Representative Byers. And I can tell you that in the time I've been a leader, I've gotten a chance to see our schools change. I've gotten to see our country change, and I've gotten to see my classrooms and the climate in my buildings change. I've seen kids grow more tolerant, even as adults have grown less so. I've seen our kids accept each other because that's what kids do. They accept on the playgrounds, on play dates, and on the fields. I've been a leader of over 3 schools, and I can tell you that when we lead with empathy, when we lead with compassion, when we lead with understanding and acceptance, kids get better. Educating gets easier. Their lives get easier. My job, while it shouldn't be easier, gets easier. Their success, their tolerance, and their empathy grows. As Kansas principal of over 10 years, I can say that this bill is not just going to hurt some kids. It is going to hurt all of my kids.
The bullying I'm going to talk about today is legislative bullying. Since Obergefell was decided in 2015, that's the Supreme Court case that recognized same-sex marriage, there have been 10 measures introduced in this building attacking transgender children. 10 of them. They couldn't wait to attack trans kids over the Obama administration's interpretation of Title IX. These bills, these bounty bills, that would tell little kids there's a $2,500 reward on your head if you get caught in the bathroom. These bills that say you can't get medical care. These bills that say you're less than. This isn't about who can shoot the highest basket. This isn't about who can serve the best volleyball. This isn't about who wins the 100-yard dash. This is a legislature showing years of animus towards LGBTQ people. And again, for the past 6 years, the target has been children. This really needs to stop.
So before he transitioned, you're at 14, you're trying to figure out who you are and who you aren't. And I remember there was a point, so Jamie growing up was super tomboyish, wore boy clothes, like basketball shorts and long t-shirts, and didn't really like to be girly, or like the typical girly look. Didn't do makeup, none of that. Well, about 12 or 13, Jada was Jamie's name before, started getting really girly into makeup and grew out, his hair, and was just like a totally different person that we were used to. Then he chopped his hair off, still wore makeup, and he said, Amber, I think I may be a lesbian. Okay, well, that's cool. I think if you think you're a lesbian, well, then be a lesbian. And then I remember he chopped his hair more and more, and then it was super short. He did it himself, so it was always a mess, which is kind of like, I don't know, to me it's a trait of his, just to know that his hair was always a mess. I remember Jamie telling me how, like he had more friends that were females or girls because they were usually more understanding and more open and accepting. But then a lot of the boys were bullying, a lot of belittling. Jamie had a really hard time in school.
State Senator Erickson and her Republican colleagues refuse to acknowledge the difficulties such legislation causes in the lives of LGBTQ kids.
Every emotionally laden argument that is thrown our way, I can throw right back at them. What about the welfare of these girls who have spent their life training and working only to have their opportunities unfairly removed?
We're really not having the debate that we need to have. The debate that we really need to have as legislators is, how is this going to affect Kansans? More specifically, how is this going to affect children? Even more specifically, how is this going to affect a particularly vulnerable subset of children?
I was looking through some materials earlier today, and there's a really nice picture of a lot of bright young faces on the steps of the Capitol when they were here for Equality Day. They said, though, we do need to note that one of the students from this photo, taken just a few years ago, is no longer alive. Please look at the faces of these bright, shining youth whose lives should be full of possibility, not pain.
There was a big controversy about bathrooms.
He talked about what it felt like to be segregated, to be forced to use the nurse's bathroom, which singled him out and brought on additional bullying, harassment, and assault from other students that was typical of his entire 4-year high school experience. His experience in his hometown of Derby and the hostility he faced, you might have heard about his experience from when he was in middle school, in which a large portion of the town's adults put anti-trans yard signs in their yards one summer.
There were signs in yards, like anti-trans signs, and sort of like a very, very obvious divide of who was accepting of Jamie and who was definitely not.
Talked about how the attacks from legislators in Kansas and around the nation, attacking his identity through things like bathroom bills, things like this anti-trans bill, emboldened students in his school to bully him, physically attack him and assault him, and threaten his life, making him feel unsafe and unwelcome in his school, in his state, in this world.
Jamie was very shy and reserved, but anytime it came to like his beliefs or things that he was strong and passionate about, he'd have all this courage that you never saw in him before. Jamie actually spoke at a school board meeting. People don't even know who I am, but they are so against me. I remember him saying that a lot, and it just, like, to hear that just hurt. People don't even know who I am, and they hate me. He looked like a boy. He always had a deeper voice, so he sounded a lot more like a boy, but people would still, and he felt like it was intentional and purposeful. Ma'am or miss, you know, all those little things. I think he took that really hard, like, I look like a boy, I sound like a boy, I dress like a boy. Everything about me says I'm a man, but you still keep calling me woman. So Jamie had a lot of sadness. He started to hang out with people that were accepting. Well, those people did drugs. And I think Jamie started to join them and medicate to numb some of that sadness that he had. I think he just kind of felt comfortable with them and they were accepting and, you know, still trying to figure himself out as a young adult. And he ended up taking a pill, and it was laced with fentanyl, and that's how he died.
I find it incredibly insulting to use the hyperbole that there will be blood on our hands, that somehow they're insulted by facts, by trying to provide a level playing field for fair competition for girls.
It did feel mean-spirited to me. You know, I've been around here a long time. I'm used to having debates with my colleagues on issues, and often we will disagree on the issues. I didn't feel like this was really an issue, a policy issue that mattered beyond just the desire to hurt some kids.
There are going to be real vulnerable people who are actually going to be affected by this policy, and probably are affected by the mere fact that we're having this debate, and they're watching this debate and they're thinking, is this a state where I really have a home? Is there really a place for me in this state? Am I wanted in this state? Do I belong in this state? And I wanted folks who were watching to feel like the answer was, at least from some of us, you do belong, you are wanted, you are valued, there is a place for you in the state.
In June of 2021, the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, passed by the Kansas Senate and the House by a margin of almost 2-1, Governor Laura Kelly vetoed the bill. One of the fiercest critics of the governor's veto was Kansas Senator Roger Marshall.
When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet I'm torn apart. Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart.
White people need to reckon with their delusion and become human for the first time. Become human for the first time so you can recognize the humanity in all the folks around you.
This is the death throes of homophobia and transphobia that we're experiencing. And so for the progress we make, there are people who don't want us to see that progress, and our progress threatens them. They're losing something, they're losing comfort. And I believe that discomfort comes out in this way, in more visible, hostile, anti-trans legislation.
It can't be negative. It can't be, we're going to erase these people. They're less than human. They don't deserve equal rights. They're mentally ill. They're sexually deviant. No way. I don't accept that. In my calm voice that I was taught in all my training, I will work to peacefully change that narrative. And I can do it best by saying, come hang out with us. Let me tell you about our journey.
In communities like Dodge City, Garden City, and Liberal, we're still out here fighting to be heard and to be seen and to just be recognized as people. Not only doing this work in America, we're doing this work in our Latina communities to be more accepted, and doing this work in ourselves, inside of ourselves mentally to be accepted.
That's the number one thing I see is kids can come out younger, they can be themselves much, much, much more openly and be happy and feel safe doing it. That is what we worked for 40 years ago. And it's nice to see we got there. Maybe not all the way, but we've made progress.
It used to be my plan to leave the state and, come back only to visit and to say hi and get on the next plane out of here. But as I've grown in my development and understanding, I've kind of claimed Kansas back as my home to want to stay at. Even if, my future takes me elsewhere, I could see coming back, when I'm older and buying a little house and retiring here.
Despite how things have gotten better in terms of equity for LGBTQ people in the world, there is still a sense of danger. I'm at this point in my life, I'm hesitant to put a trans pride flag in my yard because I don't know if one of my neighbors is, deeply religious and would try to do something to me or my family. You don't know what other people are trying to do. And because trans people are disproportionately murdered, even though I am a white man with a beard who I would say passes 99% of the time nowadays, there's still a sense of danger.
There was just a young lady killed in Kansas City. She's the second one out of Kansas City. And then there's the other ones that are dying out of the state. So my sisters are screaming at the top of their lungs, we need help. Can y'all help us? And they're relentless. And they are young ones. They're in their 20s. These young women are in their 20s. So in that aspect, for trans people of color, not yet. Not yet. But overall, I'm optimistic.
I know that Jamie, when he was here, anytime he saw that there was a chance to stand up and speak up, he did. Or anytime there was a chance to raise awareness, he did. And I was always, okay, well, we're gonna do it. I was always okay, always on board with whatever we were gonna do. And whenever he passed, I realized I couldn't be the okay person because there was no one next to me saying, I wanna do this. So I had to start being the person to say, I wanna do this.
Before I met Bucky, I was actually really self-shy, and he kind of helped me grow out of that. And I will never stop being open-minded, and I won't say, I'll think, but I'll say what I think. And I won't really have that big of a filter on what I say. He helped me see that, and he helped me see that I can be myself, and I shouldn't be anyone else.
Queer youth need your support to stay alive. that really starts with these immediate personal connections. And if you are a safe person to go to, you might actually save that kid's life.
We need to name the bigotry, and we need to call it out when we see it and not be afraid of it, because if you can take that step of standing there and naming it, if you look behind you, there will be thousands of people standing behind you.
There is no place like home. But until everyone is accepted and respected equally under the law, until all Americans are allowed to grow and discover who they are, the struggle for LGBTQ rights in Kansas and the nation continues.
I was released into the light, untethered, and it's shown me my feathers. I thought I was free up in the sky, unfettered, but now I know better, but now I know better, but now I know better. Sorry, I tried to